Welcome, good people, wherever you are. It's either good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, to the latest installment of Meetings of Minds, which will prove to be a landmark installment for two reasons. First of all, we have Ola Ada here, and we're going to have a conversation which is really about the legacy of the balance concept, the oil, the test, where it came from, the innovation behind it, where it is today, and perhaps where that's going to lead us. But also it marks the occasion, really, that the very first guest on Meetings of Minds was Ola Ada. So we've come full circle, and it's taken us to over 2 years. It's over 2 years. We've come full circle and back round to the originator. So Ola, welcome. It's great to see you. It's good to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Colin. Nice to see you again.
I'm looking forward to really going through this again. I've had the benefit of hearing this and looking at some of the background materials and having an understanding of how this was developed, where it evolved from. But I would never miss the opportunity to really get it from the horse's mouth, as we say here in the UK. And so, Ola, if you don't mind us kind of really just diving straight in, I really want to start this a little bit differently because I don't think we've covered this before. And I want to go further back than just starting to work on the notion of either the oil or the test. But really, what led you to want to even consider this? So what was the spark for you that identified this as a nutritional issue, as a problem? And what was it that made you think, actually, I can do something about this?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. To answer your questions, I think we really need to go back all the way to around 1986. So we'll start there. And if we get to 2000, year 2000 before the end of the show, I try to make it quicker. But in 1986, I have been working already in 10 years, about 10 years at the Institute of Fishery Technology Research in Tromsø, Norway. So I had done some research in the fisheries, so I knew that. But at that time, I went from Tromsø to south to Oslo to start to work for Norwegian dairies. And that was the time when the dairies had one big issue, and that was what to do with the milk fat, that was the surplus of milk fat that was developed due to all the need for light products. And at that time, the government or the Heart Health Agency, they wanted us to take away the saturated fat and substitute it with more unsaturated or polyunsaturated plant fat from the plant original. So that was the setting at that time. And of course, that was a hard task because this development of a large surplus of milk fat. But the real issue we wanted to solve or to get further into was the reduction of blood cholesterol. And that they want to do by two things. We take away saturated fat and put in more polyunsaturated fat. That was the idea for the population. And of course, the dairy is a big player in the nutritional place in the food sector.
Yeah.
So after about working for the dairies in 5 years, I went on because I was recruited to work for the margarine industry in Norway at that time, because they also got a new issue coming up. And that issue was called trans fatty acids. So I went from the dairy saturated fat to the trans fat, and the trans fat needed to be taken out of the margarines for the same reasons as saturated fat. So and what we did was more or less the same. We took away the trans fat, was removed in the mid-90s from all the margarines in Europe, because the margarine industry in Norway was part of the Unilever group, so it was a pan-European change happening. But again, the results of taking away trans fat was to put in more polyunsaturated vegetable fat or plant fat, plant oil fat. So everything we did at that time, we aimed to lower cholesterol values in the population, was to take out trans fat, saturated fat, and put in polyunsaturated vegetable fat, which is identical to saying omega-6. So we put in a lot of omega-6. And we knew that at the industry, we knew that because going from taking out trans fat, we went on to produce heart health margarines by doing the same thing, taking out the saturated and fat and putting in polyunsaturated fat. And we also do that always by putting in omega-6. And in industry, we knew that because there was started to talk about this mix of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids at that time. We are now at the end of 90s or something in that period. So the thing was that in the industry sense, when we looked at our product, we changed the ratio between omega-6 and omega-3 by putting in omega-3 from the alpha-linolenic acid from the plant, because the mixture of omega-6 and omega-3 looked better when you had plant omega-3 and plant omega-6. So on the products in the marketplace, it looks okay. But we never had a tool to find out what really happens when you use the products. So that was a big difference at that time. We did what the authority wanted us to do, but we really was not able to see what it meant directly, because we didn't have the tool. The tool today, which is, as you know, we have a better, we have the test to play with today, but at that time we didn't have that.
So I mean, essentially though, what you're saying is it was legislation led.
Yeah, it was
legislation, which is interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, we always, and I don't mean to stir up any kind of like controversy here, but there's always a notion, isn't it, that the science informs the legislators and then the legislators inform the practice. But here, there's a missing gap, really. So that's really interesting to consider. But sorry, carry on.
Legislation, they were the one who was reading all the science that was published. So they used that to guide the industry in a way, and the industry responded by technology changes. So, but at the same time, and now we are at the beginning of 2000, there was a professor because this is about a puzzle. You had to put a puzzle together to get balanced concept together. There was a professor at the University of Tromsø in Norway called Bjarne Østerud. He was testing two things: the unrefined marine oil or fish oil with refined fish oil, because also European legislation require that you have to refine fish oil before it is allowed to be consumed by humans. And that is due to environmental contaminants and so on. So you have to refine to take away contaminants, but when you do that, you also remove all other things from the oil, like smell, taste, vitamins, protective compounds, and so on. So everything is removed. So a fish oil that is refined is more or less a clean triglyceride mixture which is not very stable in a way, because you have to add back tocopherols to stabilize it in the packaging afterwards. So, but he was comparing a non-refined oil, which tastes like hell and smell like hell, with the refined oil, which is much better both taste and smell. And he was looking at some blood components and comparing it, and found out that this non-refined oil was much more biological active than this refined oil. So there was obviously something there which were taking out when you refine the fish oil, which was naturally present, and that was also stabilized in the oil when it comes to biological activity, not only oxidative stability, but also biological activity. So, and he tried a lot of things to stabilize or to change the refined fish oil. And among one of the things he did at that time was that he just made a mixture also of olive oil and fish oil. And he has just standing on his laboratory, this oil was very stable. And it was stable for months, and it's standing there out in the room temperature. So obviously there was something with this olive oil that he added that contained something which were positive. And we really didn't know what that was at that time, but we knew that, of course, it is more stable in the fish itself, doesn't oxidize, so, and that is all. But we wanted to know more about olive oil, so we went down to, we looked in Europe into who is the professor of olive oil in Europe, or minor components of olive oil. And we identified one professor called Bruno Berra at the University of Milan. So we went down there to meet with him. And we met with him, and we met his colleague, who was also working with omega-3s. That turned out to be Angela Risso, which is also as part of this story. So yeah, we met them. So we went down there to talk about olive oil. And when we were sitting talking, and we wanted them to make a report for us on all the small components in olive oil. And after a while, we started to talk about omega-3s and fish oil and so on. And they have recently made a publication where they have used this blood test that was developed published or developed at the University of Milan by some years before by Galli and co-workers. So that was the first day by actually in the laboratory using a test to check the effect of using omega-3. And now we are, 2005, 6 or something. So that was really, really interesting. And so we immediately invited them to come to Norway, because this test that they were using were only measuring 2 fatty acids. And those were arachidonic acid and EPA, nothing more. So we asked them if they could, and that was laboratory technique. So we asked them if they could come to Norway and help us to make industry of the system, make it available for outside of the laboratories. So, and in Norway, we contacted at that time one of the biggest hospitals, St. Olavs Hospital in Trondheim. And we invited Bruno Berra and Angela Risso to come to Norway to help us to introduce this test to the hospital laboratory. And they did so, and we started to make the test kit, which were needed. And we had a contact with a Norwegian computer company who could do, so we could sort of have some the automatic analysis presented from the laboratory to a potential future customer. So, and that was done so I would say in 2006, 7, 8, or that period. Yeah, some circa, approximately. Yeah, but what we then saw was the possibility of having a 3 components concept. It was a test, and we wanted a report with some recommendation, and the recommendation should of course be to a fish oil or a good oil. So, and at that time we started to discuss where should we produce the fish oil, and where should we get olive oil that have the good components with them, which is at that time already identified must be the polyphenols, because the polyphenols is identical, or not identical, but similar to components that protects the omega-3s in the food chain from the microalgae to fish to humans and so on. So and we find out that the best olive oil to get at that time was what they called a pickerel olive oil, the virgin olive oil, and that was available in Spain. So we had some contact in Spain due to an EU program that we were part of. So we contact them. It was working for the Basque Health Authority. And so we went to talk with them, and they set up a meeting with some olive oil producers of this particular olive oil. And we went down there and we met with this, we all went from Basque or Bilbao up to Rioja. So we had a good job, a good meeting with the olive oil producers and the health authority of Basque country in Rioja at the bodega.
Exciting.
Yeah, so that is a funny part of it all, and at that time we agreed that they were willing to supply us with olive oil. It had to be in containers of 1,000 liters, so it has to be in the industrial scale. So we just only had to find, where do we produce the oil at that time? Where can we produce the oil? Because we need a mix of the fish oil and this olive oil. And that was another person in the same food safety project, in European food safety project that we were doing at that time, who were from Iceland. And he told us that Lysi in Iceland is a very good producer of fish oil. So that's why. So we went from over to, or we had been already in Italy, we had been in Spain, and of course in Norway. So now we had to go to Iceland to to talk with the producer of fish oil, because it's not so easy. But because the fish oil producer, you cannot introduce a plant material into fish oil factories. So you had to find a solution. They were producing the fish oil. We were wanting to supply them with the olive oil. So we had to find a solution how they could mix it, and also they could fill it into bottles.
Just pause there a second, because the question we get asked a lot. At this stage in the development, did you already understand how much of the olive oil versus the fish oil needed to, did you understand the blend at this point, and you knew that if we have this much, that's what brings about a detectable functional change, or was this still to be explored?
No, it was already less. We had 3 versions of this mix at that time, and so we knew, because that at that time we measured the oxidative stability index as a way of seeing if it worked. Because we didn't use the test at that time to see if the mix worked, but we used the stability of oxidation stability. At an institute in Norway called SINTEF, they had this apparatus where you can check many products at the same time. So you can fill into a system where you can compare, let's say, 8 or 10 different oils at the same time you're using high heat. You're heating them up to high temperature. You're blowing in oxygen, and you are in light. So you're exposing these oils for terrible conditions. And then you measure how the electricity which turns on when it starts oxidation. So you can measure different products at the same time and see how long they last before they start to oxidize. And we saw that our mixes were far superior to many of the other products that were in the market at that time that didn't have this mix.
And so that's very much focused on the mix itself, the blend itself, and the integrity, and but with regards to the functionality, so knowing what was the ratio of the olive oil to the fish oil, and then you could go a step further, understanding the EPA to the DHA in the context of what it would bring as a change. Was that still to be?
Still has to be explored.
Yeah.
We're only focusing on getting the oil. We had actually 2 separate projects going on. One is to make this test, industrialize this test to get it into a system where it works. And the other was to build an oil that was as stable as possible. And the oil mix that we got from this oxidation stability test, we asked the Lysi in Iceland to produce. So then we had two things. We had the test and we had the oil, but we didn't have the recommendations. So we needed to find out what does it tell, because we have seen already from Italy, the studies they had in Italy, that if you added enough omega-3 to a system and you were measuring arachidonic acid and EPA, you would see a change happening in a group of healthy people, in a group of ADHD children, and a group of depressed elderly people which they were studying. So we saw from the publications that was the effect was there, but we didn't know at that time if our product would work.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what year is this now? We still about 2006, 2007, are we?
Yeah, in that period. Yeah. So and then we started just to sell the oil and make the test with people. They took the first test and we asked them to take the oil for 120 days, and that was based on the average lifetime of a blood cell being. So that was we didn't really know how long it, but we anticipated that if you take the average lifetime of a blood cell, you would have more or less have to see an effect if there was an effect. So that was the first sales we had, only a few, and we didn't have the first problem we encountered. We had to change the dosage of the daily doses. We had to find out really what it was, because it varied a lot. How much we didn't have a dosage based on of body weight. We just had a dosage based on as normal as the most people just say take a spoon or something.
Yeah.
So we talked with a football club in Norway, Lillestrøm Sports Club, and they were willing to test going on with their players, both the male and the female players. They were in the top league in Norway in both female and male. So they were willing to take this oil, and according to weight, we started to check what is needed to get from whatever level it was in the beginning down to about 3:1, which was a recommendation that was taken from the literature at that time. So what we found out was that if the dosage was per kilo, you can have the same suggestion. We ended up by 0.2 milliliter of the oil per kilo body weight. So if we did that, we suddenly saw that all people, all of them, absolutely all of them, taking the oil as recommended, and they were supervised by the trainer.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
So and they all started to get down to the 3:1 area. So that was of course a surprising thing, because the body weight from the players, they went from maybe 100 kilo down to 50 kilos. So it was when you go to men and females, so it was a very wide range, and they all got the same results, more or less. So the results, as long as you took it by your body weight, it was an easy way to get everybody to get into more or less the same level.
Yeah.
So that was that was a little surprise for us, because we used also a dosage which were different from other omega-3 suppliers in the marketplace, and so we suddenly had a product that by the test we could show that it worked, and we had a dosage, so we could make some recommendations on how to use this oil to get into balance. That was the difference, not to get enough omega-3 or something, but to get into balance. That was the key. And more or less at the same time, because we got into some routine with some sales, not very big, but there was a routine sale. People were curious about the thing, and then we decided to change the test from being only two. At that time, it was only 2 fatty acids, as like in Italy, to go from 2 to 11 by including also saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and different omega-6 and different omega-3s.
And that's an interesting move to make. So if we just take stock of the journey so far, so you've looked at this because of the industrialization of food and the legislation that swapped from saturates and trans fats into polyunsaturates, you've identified a kind of nutritional gap. And so you've approached that by counteracting the omega-6 in a very logical format, because you've gone, well, there's an increased prevalence of the AA, so we're going to start to counteract that with the EPA. You're measuring AA and EPA, which makes complete sense. And then you've taken this step now, which is to go, well, actually, we need to measure more. So, sometimes less is more. But at this point, you've said, well, we need to measure more. We need to tell people about more. Why? What made you think? Because it seems pretty neat so far. So what made you go, actually, we need to tell people more and we need to measure more?
It was, I mean, to understand, I mean, if you look at the arachidonic acid and EPA, it is combined, it is around maybe 50% of the fatty acids. And we didn't know if anything was happening to the rest of the fatty acids. So we wanted to get up to 98% by selecting the most common fatty acids that is in the biological or the pathways in the bodies or biological. So we wanted to know more. And for instance, the biggest the fatty acids in balanced oil, which is the highest content of due to the olive oil, is oleic acid. Oleic acid. So what happens to oleic acid? That was the question, and there is other omega-6 which were much more abundant than arachidonic acid. What happens to all those? So we wanted to know more. And it was very easy because when you make the analysis of the GC, you get all the others. So just had to make a routine of extracting them and getting them into the database.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is so academically science-led. So a pure business person wouldn't do this, because they go, right, the less cost, like keep it really simple, and that is such a business impulse even to this day, like, really keep it. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because this has been such an academic pursuit. This has been so research-led. Well, we should know this and we'll look at more of that. And it's fascinating when you consider where it's placed now. Its origin is that. And actually, something else that's really stood out to me in this history is the fact that it's got its roots in sport. I mean, we've come full circle. Sport now is kicking down the door to us, and particularly football. But we go right back to the origins, and where do we find it? Placed in sport, looking at those ratios. So it's mind blowing to me, really, as to the journey it's been on.
Yeah, we learned very, very early that it didn't help the sports club to score more goals.
No.
But it improved some of the physicals.
Yeah, having spent a lifetime in sports, I always say I can't promise you a win. All I can promise you is that you're in a better position to win. That's all we can ever offer anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. One of our first, when we started to look out of Norway, it was a little later on, but one of the first users of balanced oil in this sense, that was Marco van Basten, this famous Dutch player. So
yeah,
he was a user for I don't know now, but for a long time.
An early adopter. I need to be careful what I say here, but I've got a feeling that might still hold true. I'm sure this was mentioned to me recently. I'll follow up on that. I'll check up on that. I'm sure there might be a continuing legacy to that.
Yeah.
So we've gone through, just to bring us back up in the chronology now of where the history of this is. We've gone through all of this. You've identified that you're going to measure more of those fatty acids. So there's a more robust test. So was all of this information then what led to a further change in the dosage recommendations?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the dosage recommendation was only taken directly from the footballs, the study with the footballers. But this increase in fatty acid was just that we wanted to know more.
Yeah.
And to make what we did a few things other also to learn even more, and that was our biggest question was, if this is going to be big or used by a lot of people, the food safety has to be really, really high on the agenda. We really need to make sure that we don't harm anybody. So we were studying a lot of documents from the EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, and we went into a European project. We get our oil into European projects. And that was because we knew scientists in Iceland and in the Netherlands and so on. So we wanted, one thing is to say that you have a product that is oxidative stable outside of the body, but what happens inside of the body? And according to EFSA, we were very clearly within the ranges that they considered as safe. But we wanted to be quite sure, so we asked TNO in the Netherlands to measure to find out if the oxidative stability also comes within the body. And so they used the malondialdehyde to as a measure of oxidative activity inside the body. So what they did at that time was we had a test where we had about 100 people eating yogurts for 10 years, 10 weeks.
10 years, 10 weeks.
Not 10 years. They were big, but 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And placebo, one group, half placebo, half with balance oil in normal levels. So and the placebo was refined olive oil, which is more or less neutral. And then they measured malondialdehyde in several times in those groups, and we find out that nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. So the scientists were very disappointed because they wanted to have differences to publish. But I was very happy because that means that our oil didn't create any oxidative activity inside the body. So it was completely stable. So I was looking for a zero result, and they were looking for something exciting, but nothing happened.
Anyone who's wanting to publish is always looking for a change. You know
Yeah.
publication bias. You want to measure change. Yeah, so you've had exactly what you need.
Yeah.
They're disappointed. And so that modified then the recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then, just to go back a step now, what we've learned, obviously, because we're further down the road, is that with sports, we go more towards those kind of original dosage recommendations, because there's a lot of other factors that are impacting on the functionality of the omega-3 when someone is training and competitive at that level every day. So right back then, again, I find this so interesting that it started there. It went through this modification justifiably because you got to factor in safety and compliance. But now within a sports setting, we're seeing a similarity to what it was nearly 20 years ago. So a whole heap of learning in between. So let's bring this story back up to date. We've now made an adjustment to the dosage recommendation for the general population. You're happy, the research group are unhappy. So what happens next? What's the next step in this? Are Vitas involved at this point?
Yeah, we went from Vita was not involved before we started to talk with Zinzino. We met with because we were a little group of more technology oriented people.
Yeah.
We were not marketing and sales people, so we were looking for someone who could help us to get this fly, because we could do it up to a certain level, but I mean, none of us were really interested in the sales and marketing. So and then we met with Örjan and Dag. We were sitting in the kitchens in different houses and discussing, and they invited us after a while to come to a Zinzino event in Gothenburg, where they and that was at that time Zinzino was only selling coffee and coffee machines. So we were invited to Gothenburg, and they were introducing this concept, and I was making a presentation, and after that everybody was invited to take a test. So there was a couple of thousand people there or something, and they were all invited to take a test. So we were sitting taking tests in the whole lunch break. It was only a test taking session because everybody wanted to take this test. Yeah. So that, I think, was the selling in part into Zinzino, and having and our sales went up to with the help of Zinzino, the sales, because this was done in Bioactive Foods, our company. And the sales went up to 55 million euros or something, which were very good for a people for a company of 4 people.
Yeah.
But that was not our. I mean, our life was not selling, producing and selling product and so on. So we decided after a while that it was better for us to sell it to Zinzino. They could go on, because we believed in Zinzino. We had different options, but Zinzino was for us clearly that we believed in.
Mm.
And in the next step, when Zinzino took over, also we started to look for or we did that also before it. So we started to look for cheaper options for the test, or more. We started to produce. First, the test was produced in India. The kits were produced in India before it was moved to I think it is Latvia or something now, or went there on. And we looked at the cost at the hospital was if there could be other options which could be used in Norway. And then Vita was the one that was picked up, and Vita was actually very well advanced in this technology. So, and they had all the required documents to be supporting an activity outside of little Norway. So
yeah, make it to make it globally viable as well.
Yeah.
But even your comment a moment ago, about looking at this for people very much from a technical point of view, who weren't really interested in sales and marketing and that. And during my tenure so far, I've said this to so many people. If you are purely a business person, you would not develop this product. It goes against what a business person would do, because it's complex, it's involved, it requires a sufficient amount of explanation. There is a test procedure to it that requires a level of engagement and accuracy. The minute you step into this world, along with it comes a little bit of a notion of, I have to understand a little bit more here. It's not just like going and making a typical purchase. And that shouts loud from what you've explained. That really does come from the core of what it's about, which it was never developed because a business entrepreneur saw an opportunity. It was developed because scientists and researchers and technicians identified a legitimate problem and then started to pursue that and do something about it. And it's very much a labor of love for a long time. So really, you carried this and continued to work on it and develop it for over a decade, over 10 years.
Yes, yes, yes. I have been in balance since 2006, I believe.
You're
That is
the
that is
longest
almost
person
two
in balance.
decades. I'm
Yeah.
I'm getting older, you know.
So you're the longest person in balance, Ola. That's
Absolutely, no one did it before me.
no, yeah, no one did.
Then it's I tested on myself.
And
Yeah,
so there's a handover point now. So it's developed, it's intact, it's proven. So it's a proven concept. It's got a sufficient amount of research and evidence behind it. Vitas are involved. So there's been a whole globalization of how this can now be facilitated to reach more people. The formulation is understood from a stability point of view and from a functionality point of view. Zinzino are on board who can have a conversation with millions of people all over the world and take the science direct into the home. So now we've got this movement, this momentum that's carried over all those years since. And as you're still an active participant in the scientific advisory board and you're very much up to date with what it is that we do and where it is, it'd be interesting to know, what do you think? And feel free to talk openly. What do you think is the future innovation around it? What do you think are the essential next steps?
yeah. I, there is two answers to that. First, I just want to say, first of all, there is two things I think that is the reason why this happened. The first thing is that because you have been working in science, you have a network in science. So you know a lot of people and you're able to talk with scientific communities. That is a key. The other was that Zinzino has this way of multi-level marketing. People talk. Without this talking, it would have been difficult to get to this point. To the last question, where do it goes from now? You know, I am now 72. I was 65 in 2017, and that is when you get elderly by definition.
Yeah.
So I have been elderly for maybe I think this 7 years or something. But as you get elderly, you the things you are interested in has something to do with being elderly too. So what I would have, if I had, from my age perspective, had to did I look at next? I would start to look at frailty among elderly people, and that is the reason is very simple, because that is one of the biggest problems for elderly people, and elderly people are getting more, is getting a big group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are growing. This group is growing every year, so it's becoming a big market group. And another frailty it has been checked in many countries, and it is somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population already, and it's growing. And this year there was a new report coming out from a UK biobank about frailty, studying the omega-3s and frailty. So they were studying, they were looking into this database and comparing frail people with people that were healthy, and they were looking at they had the data for the intake of the diet. So they were looking at the fish eaters compared to non-fish eaters, and they were comparing fish supplement eaters compared to non-supplement eaters in the omega-3 range. And it was very clear that one big difference is between the group of frail people and non-frail people was that there was a much higher intake of omega-3s in the healthy group. So it's very simple. All people have to do is to make sure that their parents is still using balanced oil when they're.
Yeah, true. And
I think it is a very simple. I think they would help they will help people by actually recommending this oil to their parents and the family member that is getting older.
I couldn't agree more. And I'd even add to that. So the number one factor that influences quality of life above the age of 65 is physical independence, and then that's side. And we know the role that omega-3 plays in both the development and maintenance of lean mass.
Yeah.
So we know that it has a very when we start to look at anatomy, when we start to look at strength and mobility and flexibility, and we look at dietary components, omega-3 is a huge part of that. We've got this growing population, thankfully, of elderly people. At a faster rate than there are new people coming into the world. So this is the population for us to be concerned, because this is the people that we live amongst. This is the reality of our world.
You don't want them in the hospital. You want them out in the free.
That's right. And I mean, it's very, and I agree with that sentiment, and that's a very pragmatic way of looking at it. But it's also about making that health span match a lifespan. So giving people such a good quality of life for as long as possible, recognizing the fact that they're going to live longer, and there's more people living longer. So I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting, just to side note this a little bit, I get approached a lot by people who say, I've tried to convince this person that they should take balance oil. And I say, don't convince anyone. There's already billions of people taking omega-3 supplements that just need to be converted to a better one. And then the second one people will say is, and I understand it, which is the notion of, we've got to save the youth. You go, no, we've got to focus on the people who are already living and can optimize their health and change their health outcomes. So it's interesting, but it's from the trenches, as we say, Ola. It's your lived experience now. And you don't need me to say it. You look phenomenal for 70. I don't think you're a typical 72, Ola, and you know that. You know that. You're as healthy as a butcher's dog. So as
it works. It still works really good.
But as we wrap up this, and it's been, it's been such a pleasure to have the front row seat at listening to this, and it's explained so much more for me. And the way that you've explained it, Ola, I think is so easy for people to access, but also gives a lot of clarity and assurance around things that people ask questions about. And so as we close out this month's meetings of minds, are there any final comments you'd like to make on what we've covered, or where you think it's headed?
No, I am so impressed by the maybe one comment, and that is because Zinzino has been so fantastic in spreading this oil or this concept around the world. You see that, and that we already saw that at about 1,000 tests. We saw that it doesn't really matter what you're eating and how high your balance is. If you take balance oil, you will all get to balance at your age, because the age is by itself is changing the balance a little, but it doesn't really matter where you live, what you eat. As long as you take balance oil, you will be balanced.
I can't top
by the daily doses according to your weight.
I can't top that, Ola. That's a great way to close the session. So there we are, folks. Ola, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure to listen to you and to learn from you, as always. To everybody who's listening in, I hope you took notes. I really hope you did. There was so much to take from this. So many questions that I get asked were then answered right from the source. So please have taken notes. If not, listen again. Take those notes when this is made available. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your attendance, participation. Continue doing well, being well, keeping well, spreading the message. And we look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Meetings of Minds. And until then, look after each other, stay well, and we'll see you further down the road. Thank you, Ola.
Thank you, Colin.